bit talking about Working Families Party, and specifically here in Rhode Island, and how we think about our path to changing Rhode Island to be a better place with public policy that better represents all of us, and where all of your campaigns fit into that vision and mission. Kind of state is Rhode Island. We hear a lot, I'm sure you guys hear a lot, like, Rhode Island, well, we're kind of like a blue state, but actually we're a pretty conservative state, right? Have any of you all heard that before? Yes, I see a lot of heads nodding. We don't think that's true. We just don't think that that's the case, and we are out to prove it. So I think when we're thinking, what is WFP, and like, why are we in this work? You can think about this question. We're always out to answer the question of what kind of state is Rhode Island, and we have a particular theory about what the answer is. So one of the things that is true about Rhode Island is that our public policy is really disconnected from what people actually want. And more than what they actually want, what they actually need. That's true in states and in governments all across the country. It's certainly true of our federal government, but we think it's particularly true of Rhode Island. This might be a little hard to read because it's small, but this is from a poll that we did when we worked on Earned Sick Days. This past year we did a poll, and we asked about a bunch of different issues, basic sort of economic justice, working families kinds of issues, and these are the answers that we got. The only thing you need to know here is the blue parts are people who support it. Okay, this is Earned Sick Days. Almost 90% of people support it. Great, we just got that passed, right? It was very hard work. It should not have been that hard, given that 90% of people support it. This is $15 an hour minimum wage, right? I think lots of times people will tell me this is a radical concept, but almost 70% of Rhode Islanders support it. Now these are all voters, right? This isn't Democrats, this isn't like our friends, this isn't our email list. These are people who regularly vote in elections in Rhode Island. This is raising taxes on the rich to fund crucial services, even higher than $15 an hour minimum wage. And we didn't even tell them what the money was going for, right? Very simple statement here, right? This is 2 years of free college. This is expanding paid family medical leave. So this is I just remember this whenever anybody tells me Rhode Island is a conservative state, because it just ain't so. Rhode Island is not a conservative state. The voters are with us in terms of our values. That is not, however, what we see from our government for the most part. At the state level, and even at the local level, right? And we think that's because of this vicious cycle that keeps our values out of government. And it goes something like this. You heard this story. This is a popular narrative in the media and has been for decades. Government gets blamed for all problems. Now, the government isn't guilty of making some problems worse, but in general, government gets blamed for all problems. Therefore, government is therefore seen as dysfunctional. Sometimes true, but certainly it's perpetuated to us from lots of sources. Good people tune out, right? We think that's intentional, right? One of the things they're trying to do when they tell us stories about how little government can do to improve communities is to get people to tune out. And when good people tune out, good people don't run for, win, and serve in public office. Therefore, government isn't responsive, because it hasn't got the right people in it, and it continues to be blamed for all problems. And you see how this starts to be reinforcing, right? And we go down and down and down and down. We get worse outcomes from government, we get a worse set of people interested in running for office, and things get worse and worse. Okay. We're all about changing this cycle. I think when we think about all the things we think about doing in the world, they all fit in here somewhere. So I've tried to create the virtuous circle here. And notice it starts in a different place. First step is good people tune in. The next step is where you all come in, is good people run for, win, and serve in public office. Once we get that going, government will be more responsive. Government will actually make a positive difference in people's lives. Government will be seen as important and understood that way, and it will help good people tune in. So I just want to say we've been doing this already, right? Like we've been working on this problem, and you got some pictures of it here. This is a community meeting. At the top, you have a community meeting we did right after Trump got elected with Resist Hate. That's good people tuning in. Here you have Marcia Ranglin-Vassell, who won a state rep seat against the powerful majority leader. That's good people running for office. Down here you have our Earned Sick Days campaign. That's people working to make government actually responsive. Here you have the governor signing that piece of legislation into law. That's actually making a difference in people's lives. We got a question mark on the last one here because we don't know yet the extent to which that hasn't started to make a difference in people's lives yet. It hasn't started to make people see government as more important, but like that's the point, right? Here's where we are in the cycle and we want to keep going. Okay. So how important is your campaign to this? Really important. This is how we get from good people tuning in. Congratulations, you're all spending a weekend with us in a basement. You're tuned in, right? To good people run for, win, and serve in public office. And that we just see as a crucially important link in this cycle. Okay, that's an introduction about who we are and why we're doing this and how you all fit into our master plan to make Rhode Island a better place. Any questions so far? Great. Now we're going to start to talk immediately about how. It's nice for people to tune in. It's nice for people. It's great. It's really exciting when people say, I want to run. We want to give you the tools to actually win those elections. We believe strongly that progressives can, and we certainly have this experience, progressives run and win elections. Progressives can win surprising victories. I'm just going to show you a couple. You guys recognize this person? This is Janine Calkin. She's a state senator. Now, I think she is coming this afternoon. She beat a 30-year, I think, incumbent, the Senate President Pro Tem, a guy who had opposed paid family medical leave, was anti-choice, etc. She was an organizer for Bernie. She just knocked on a whole bunch of doors. That's Janine. This is Jason Knight. He's a defense attorney. He beat a long-standing incumbent who'd opposed the minimum wage, also anti-choice and sort of pro-gun rights in the East Bay. This is Marcia Ranglin-Vassell. You saw a picture of her before. She beat the sitting majority leader. And this is Dawn Oyer, who I think you're also going to meet this afternoon. She just, in Newport, won a Democratic primary against 3 other people, 2 of whom were sitting elected officials, and 1 of whom was endorsed by the Democratic Party. This is all just in the last year and a couple of months, right? And we didn't do something like this at this time in 2015, right? So think about this and then scale it up by the power of all of you. Okay, next. So what actually matters in a progressive's ability to win a surprising victory? A bunch of things matter, but not everything that you might think. First, it's a little slow. Yeah.
You said shake it.
Yeah.
Before you go, a heck of a lot farther. Are we going to get these slides?
You can if you want.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yes.
Please.
We can send them to you afterwards.
Okay.
We're still working on the ones for tomorrow.
No. And if you change them between now and you send them, that's fine too.
Yeah, we can send you these slides. A lot of them are just pictures, but they'll hopefully be good reminders for you too of what the lesson was that went with the picture. Okay, first thing that matters is talking to the right people. We did a little training in Westerly not that long ago and talked to a candidate who had run for town council before, and she had talked to every single registered voter, right? Now, you don't need to do that. We're going to talk about how you can make your life much easier by talking to the right people. You're going to talk to them in the best way, and we'll talk a lot about this, what the best way is and how personal that is. With the right message. This matters incredibly, right? You can talk to somebody, it's not just the case that you need to show your face in front of voters, you need to give them a reason to support you, and the right one. You need to have the resources to do all that. So sometimes there's this myth out there that grassroots campaigns are cheap and easy. That is not the case. They are expensive and hard. You don't need to have the most money in the world, right? But you do need to raise money and have people to help you in order to have the resources to do it. working hard matters, right? A lot of the people who we saw on the previous slide got elected for a lot of reasons, but one of them was because they spent a lot of time out there knocking on doors and talking to their neighbors. Matching your strengths to your opponent's weaknesses, figuring out what is the contrast between you and your opponent that highlights the things that are great and wonderful about you, at least some of the things that are great and wonderful about you. We probably aren't going to get to talk about all of your skills and talents when you run for office, but also highlights your opponent's weaknesses, makes that kind of contrast. And then building a strategy that works over time. If you do this well, the situation in your race won't be the same come September of next year as it is right now. It won't be understood the same way. So we're going to talk about all these things at some point in the next 2 days. There might be a few more things on the list of things that matter in a progressive's ability to win a surprising victory, but not many, right? It's not a super long list. You know, and it doesn't include skywriting or TV commercials or, you know, having the endorsement of the most powerful elected officials or anything like that, right? Okay. Oh, and some things you don't control. I'm not going to promise any of you. I try not to promise people things that we can't deliver on. I'm not going to promise any of you that you run the best campaign you're going to win, right? 2 people run against each other, and one of them wins every time. That means 2 idiots run terrible campaigns, one of them wins. It means 2 really smart strategists run against each other, and one of them wins and one of them loses, right? So some things are out of your control. Okay, but we're going to start with this question of targeting. Does anyone know what I mean by targeting? Who you're talking to. Who you're talking to, right? This question of, am I talking to the right people? Why does it matter if we're talking to the right people? Time, right? Resources in general, right? Like none of us live in this world. I love this picture. Thanks, Ari. None of us live in this world with unlimited time and money, so we need to target. What other resources? You have time. That's a key resource on a campaign. What other resources do you have? People. Money. Okay, I just want to say this. Can you get more people?
Yes.
Yes, right? Like we're going to talk a lot about volunteer recruitment. You can get more people. If you have money, you can hire people. Can you get more money?
Yes.
Yes, we're going to talk a lot about fundraising. You can definitely get more money. If your candidate tells you they can't get more money, they just don't want to make more calls. Can you get more time? No, sir, right? So especially the candidate's time. So a lot of when we think about targeting and campaign strategy, we're thinking about how to maximize our resources, but especially how to maximize the candidate's time. Okay. So there's an opportunity cost. This is a concept from economics. It's things on a campaign aren't good or bad. They're better or worse than other things, right? Would it be fun to have a plane fly over your district and do skywriting of your name? Sure, right? Like nothing wrong with that, except how much would it cost you in resources and what could those resources have been better spent on? So it's not that skywriting is bad, but skywriting is way worse than what you might have done with that. I don't have any idea how much it costs to do skywriting. However many thousands of dollars that might have cost you to do the skywriting, you probably could have done a couple pieces of mail or hired a canvasser for a few weeks or whatever. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? So whenever we're talking about things on a campaign, so I get upset when people are like, this seems like it would be good. Sure, it would be good. That's not the question. Is it better or worse than what you otherwise might have spent your resources on? Okay. Come now. Okay, so if you have limited resources and you need to focus them, target them on talking to the right people, how are we even going to figure that out, who the right people are? Fortunately, we have a little tool for this. It's called a targeting box, and it starts like this. It's a box. And inside the box is everybody who's eligible to vote for you. So who's eligible to vote for you?
Registered voters.
Registered voters.
In my district.
In your district. Actually, people who aren't registered or eligible, they can get, especially now, right? We're in December. We have a long time until the election. People can get registered. Someone said, in my district. Hugely important, right? This is already going to affect your campaign decisions. Is it smart to stand at the Stop and Shop and pass out flyers? No. Why not?
Because
vote.
half of them are not gonna vote for you. They're either registered Republicans, or they're not in your district, or.
Yeah, they might not even be in your district, right? Like, supermarkets are not neatly divided up in these district lines. Wouldn't that be convenient for us, right? If they were. Other things about eligible voters?
Similar values.
Eligible, we're talking just about the most general here.
Over 18 years old.
Over 18 years old, they have to be citizens too. That's some districts, almost all of your neighbors are citizens, in some districts that's not the case. Makes a big difference. Okay, so everyone else is outside this box. Excellent. Oh, sorry guys. The next way we're going to divide up voters is how likely they are to actually show up, right? We all know that voters aren't created equal this way, right? Everybody's clear about that? Some people will be like, yeah, of course I vote every 4 years. I vote like 4 times a year, guys. I vote a lot more than that. So there are differences between voters in terms of how likely they are to vote. We usually think of this as their frequent voters, infrequent voters, and non-voters. Yes?
I don't know if it's something you're gonna talk about later, so if this is tell me to wait. But is there any worth in spending your time trying to get people who normally vote every 4 years to be like, yeah, but it's actually you should vote this time too?
We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So.
Okay.
Frequent voters, infrequent voters, and non-voters. Now this is specific to your race, right? If you're running for president, half the country is a frequent voter, right? And almost everybody else is probably somebody who might be convinced to vote. If you're running for city council in a special election with nothing else on the ballot, a lot of people who would have been frequent voters if you were running for president are effectively non-voters for you, right? So you have to think about where these lines really are for your race. The other way that we're going to divide up voters is how likely they are to actually support you or your campaign. So all voters are either ours, they're undecided, or they're theirs. And that's true no matter what kind of campaign we're running. So you might be the Democrat running against the Republican, in which case, that's how we're traditionally think about campaigns. But a lot of you are running in races where you're going to be the Democrat running as another Democrat, or you're going to be running in a city council race with a bunch of other people. But in any case, regardless of the structure of the race, people are either our people and we can count on them, they're their people, or they haven't made up their mind yet. That's it. So there aren't really any other ways to divide up voters. Yes?
Is there one other way, and how would you look at voters during a primary?
I would look at them the same way. In a primary, voters are still ours, theirs, or undecided. So let's just talk for a minute, because this is always complicated or tricky for people. So we're going to talk a little bit about a theory about political parties. Who here is registered in a political party? Okay, all of you. Somebody want to volunteer what party they're registered in or why?
Democrat, because they seem to match my values more frequently than Republican.
Yeah, so exactly. Party is a proxy for matches my values. And it's an imperfect proxy, right? This is part of how we have some politicians who don't actually represent our values very well. It's because we have a lot of people out there who are like, oh, this guy's a Democrat, probably he's on my team. I would say, and sometimes they're wrong. Yeah, definitely sometimes they're wrong. I don't know. So I would say in every election, voters are divided up in ours, theirs, and undecided. In some partisan elections, you have this extra proxy that gives people the opportunity to take a shortcut in figuring out who is on their side. And one of the things we seek to do at Working Families is to provide them with a different shortcut, right? A more accurate shortcut as to who shares their values. Does that make sense? Yeah? Does that answer your question?
Not yet.
Okay. I'll try as we go. Okay, so we're going to put these two ways of dividing people up together. Yes. I somehow don't have a blank one. Where's Abby?
She's driving to the office to get some.
Oh. Can you make this go back a couple of slides here? On the one of you?
Yeah.
You got it?
For some reason that I can't do from here. I can only go forwards. Go back one more. Okay, we don't have the slide in between. Okay, so go to the next slide. Sorry. Nope, back one. This one. Normally I would make you guys guess where you want to spend your time and resources, but now they are highlighted for you on the screen. So I would always say you want to spend your time in these three. See what happened here? We put these 3 ways together. We have 9 boxes. We're going to pick some to spend our time on. We're going to pick this one, ours undecided. Why?
Because you can bring them.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to show up, and we ought to take our best shot at getting them to vote for our candidate. This is what, when we talk about campaign message later on, this is what a campaign message is designed to do, right? It's designed to get the people who might or might not vote for you to support your campaign, right? So if you've ever had the experience, and I'm not saying this is a fun experience, but I'm going to tell you why it happens. If you ever had the experience of working for a candidate who you just think is awesome, and then they're like going around the community talking about stuff that you don't care about at all, that is because, if they're doing it right, they've designed their message to persuade these undecided people, and you, because you already think they're awesome, are way over here. You're already their voter. Okay, so that's the sort of lavender box up here. What are we doing in these other boxes?
Nothing.
Nothing? In any of them?
Why? Everybody's funds from your.
Yeah, this group of people, they are already planning to vote for you. They are definitely going to vote. Now, it's obviously easy to spend too much time with these people, right? Because they're fun, right? Very, very good, fun people, right? But you do actually need to spend a fair amount of time talking to them, because that is where your money's going to come from. That is where your volunteers are going to come from. It's where your lawn signs and all the stuff you need to power the rest of the campaign is coming out of this green box right here. So we're not telling you don't spend time talking to your base. We're saying the conversation you're having with your base is a different conversation than the one you're having with this persuadable universe here. It's one where you're trying to mobilize them to help you actually win the election. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, then we have this aqua box here. There are some people in the world who might or might not vote, and Jamie, this gets to your question, right? But who, if they did show up, would almost certainly vote for you. So in lots of races, the margin of victory can be turning out 50, 100, 300 people from this group of folks who might or might not vote, but who might be convinced to vote for you. Now, everybody has some of these people, right? Like, this is very personal to your campaign. You need to think about it critically. And we tend to overestimate this, right? Because what do we think we are when we run for office? We pretty much always think we're the bomb. And so we think, oh, all these people are going to show up to vote for me, right? Who wouldn't normally vote because I am so special. I applaud that way of thinking. It's going to lead you astray in your campaign. People need to have a very good reason to vote in an election they wouldn't normally vote in. Now, but everybody has some of these people, right? Like your Aunt Mildred, right, who votes every 4 years. She's definitely going to come out to vote if you're running for city council. So, you know, at a minimum, you have the people you know personally who are excited about you, who might show up to vote. If you're, say, the first Latino candidate running in a district that has a sort of Latino population, and they've never had that experience of having a candidate who seemed to come from their community, who's was articulating their values run before, you may have a much bigger pool of people here than somebody else does. But I do want to caution folks to say, this can be an extraordinarily important part of winning. It's usually numerically not the biggest piece of the votes you're going to need to win. You usually get most of the votes you're going to need to win out of here. Now, it also depends on what kind of election it is, right? In a Democratic primary, you have to do much more persuading because people don't have that proxy to use of party. And it's a harder election to turn people out into. In a general election, you have more people voting anyway, you have this proxy to use, and you might be able to do more of this. So for every election, you're going to say, all right, I need to get some votes that I don't have already. I'm going to get some of them from here and some of them from here. And the balance might be different for different campaigns.
Real quick, but are unlikely voters
Down at the bottom or in the middle?
or infrequent,
Yeah.
whoops,
Oops. Okay.
likely to be In a primary, let me say it differently. In a primary, are undecided voters likely to turn out? I mean, I would think that in a primary, you're going in to get your guy out.
It depends, right? So we're talking about this at the beginning. It depends on at what point of the campaign, right? So let me say this. So let me try to. So I'm undecided in almost every primary at the beginning, right? Because if it's a Democrat or Republican, I vote for the Democrat.
Sure.
But if it's a primary, I pretty much start off as undecided every time. Now I make up my mind pretty quickly because I know a fair number of things and I'm into this stuff and I'm kind of nerdy. But at the beginning, I'm in this persuasion universe. If you have gotten to the end of the campaign and you've talked to these people a ton and you've delivered a message to them and you've, even if they voted in other primaries and they're still undecided, well, first of all, I'd say they're probably actually lying to you. They're not undecided. They're going to support your opponent. But if they really are still undecided at the very end, you're right. They might not show up.
They might not show up. It's not vote for me or vote for somebody else. It's just stay home. Because I'm undecided. It's only a primary.
But that's not true for most undecided voters through most of the campaign. I would say most people who are regular voters, they're going to vote.
Sure.
They're going to pick somebody, and they might do it at various different points in the campaign. I'm going to pick somebody a year in advance.
And if you're successful, they're going to go right into the green box.
Yes, and then they're going to be in the
They
green
go
box,
directly into the green box.
and you can raise money from them, and you can get them to volunteer. Yeah, for some of you, you might be doing this already with some undecided voters, and you're all through the campaign, you're filling up this green box with people. Right now, it might be, at coffees or whatever, and later on, it's going to be knocking on doors, but it might be slow at first and then faster later on. Does that make sense? Jamie?
Does the decision-making on how to persuade people change if it's an election with you vote for multiple people?
Mm-hmm. When I do a longer version of this training, which some of you came to at various other places around the state, I would say this. Every election is different, and you have to build this strategy yourself. Okay, so I'm going to back up and say this. Please don't decide what to do on your campaign based on what you've seen other people do on their campaigns. Because remember what I said about two idiots running against each other, right? Even if you have seen somebody do it and they won, that's not necessarily a good reason. This targeting box is one of the ways that you sort out what the right strategy is for your own campaign. And that means you have to take into account a bunch of things. We talked about primaries, we talked about general elections. Jamie's talking about the kind of municipal race it usually is, where you can vote for 3 or 5, how many can you vote for? 4. You can vote for up to 4 candidates. Yes, that definitely changes the strategy. It definitely changes the way you tell the message story that we're going to talk about later today. Because if you and I are running against each other, I need to make the case that you should support me and not you, right? I need to create a very clear contrast, and that contrast is really important in my message. If I'm hey, vote for me, but also you could vote for Jamie if you want to, that's a different story, right? And you run the risk, if you're running in a race like that, if you're creating sometimes it makes sense to create a very clear contrast against one or a couple of the other candidates, but, that will alienate some people who could potentially vote for you. Yes?
I'm not sure if it's in that chart, but to talk to the youth, what category do you belong? I mean, they're very important, especially in the community in Providence. I was raised in Providence, even though I lived in Johnston and raising my kids there. But I think the youth is very important it's their future.
Yeah.
So whoever they're voting for, what category, and I don't know if you train people for that, to speak to them about the importance of,
So we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but a lot of the demographic information about people we use often when people talk about that in terms of campaigns, they're often using it as a proxy for one of these things, right? So people are often saying, you need to talk to the old people on your campaign because they vote. This is true, more old people than young people vote, but we're using it as a proxy for how likely they are to vote. So a young person who's pretty likely to vote, I'm going to talk to a lot. If I'm a young person or somebody who's done a lot of youth work in my life, who's running for office, and nobody like that has run there before, I might count some of those people here, right? Because they have a particular reason why it might be worth it to them to turn out for me in particular. A lot of young people are going to be down here for some of these races. And so this is a great moment to say, where do we like to spend too much time that is painful to give up on? where it's fun, our base, right? Like, if we could spend all the time on our campaign, like in the living rooms of people who supported us, talking to other people who support us, that would be like a great way to run for office. You definitely can't win that way. Maybe unless you're the incumbent, right? Okay, where else do we like to spend too much time? Feels good to spend time, but doesn't actually necessarily get us to winning.
Sort of the opposite of what you said, when I'm arguing with someone.
Yeah, feels so good, right? Like,
pounding them into dust,
yeah.
they're never gonna vote for me.
Yeah, right, there are some assholes out there, and it really feels good to tell them what for. But it doesn't get you any more votes. They weren't gonna vote for you before, they weren't gonna vote for you afterwards. I once spent, and this is really hard to resist. Like, I teach this stuff, and I definitely have spent like 20 minutes arguing with an old dude about abortion, right? Okay, so, do I think it was good for him to have me have that argument with him? Yes, right? What's the problem with my spending 20 minutes talking to this guy about abortion? Yeah, I was out knocking on doors. I ran into him in the lobby of his building, right? Like, I could definitely have talked to like 2 or 3 more useful people in that same amount of time, right? So again, opportunity cost. And then the other one, Carla, this is can always be really painful with youth and with like less likely voters to be like, look, we're progressives, like we believe that these people should vote. We believe that our democracy would be better if all of these people voted. But spending your time down here on your campaign is not actually the best way to win. So if you're lucky, you live in a community that has some great organizations that do that kind of work year round and who will like ramp it up because there's an interesting and exciting campaign running for going on. But yeah, that's always a really hard thing.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh boy. So since we've targeted our voters, if we think about the average, can you go? Yeah. Okay, so here's a case study. Here's what targeting does for you. So I tried to do a sort of like average Rhode Island state rep primary. Say there are about 15,000 people in a Rhode Island state rep district. Maybe about 8,000 of them are registered voters. I made this up a little bit, but registered Democrats, there are 2,500. About 4,000 unenrolled. All of these people are eligible to vote for you. How many of them actually voted in similar elections, right? The history of who voted in which elections is public. You can know. You don't know who they voted for, but you know which elections they showed up for. So Democrats and unenrolled who voted in 1 out of 3 of the last primary elections, that might be like 1,200 people. So if your campaign has $12,000 to spend on field and mail and all the ways that we're going to try to persuade people and get people out to vote, then the difference is you could be spending, if you focused on those 1,200 people, $10 per voter as opposed to $1.50 per voter. Now you can say a lot more to somebody, or certainly a lot more times, with $10 than you can with $1.50. That can buy you more mail, it can buy you more chances to knock on their door, it can buy you more opportunities to have longer conversations with them in somebody's living room. It's not only money, but like money is the easiest to see as we demonstrate this, but the resource differential is very real here, right? Yes?
And the assumption is, in a pool of 8,000 voters, that you could win with 1,200.
You could probably win with half of 1,200. I said 1,200 people typically vote in one of these elections, so you only need, how many votes do you need to win?
601.
One more.
Okay, one more, if it's a two-way race. I would strongly encourage you to get yourself a little cushion. I've done enough recounts in my time to know that it's really uncomfortable to be in a situation where one vote might matter that much. But yeah, so I mean, Rhode Island state rep districts are small. 15,000 people is small for a district, right? But the number of people who actually vote is really small, and that means, right, 600 people? Can you all talk to 600 people personally? Yes. Yeah, for sure, right? So you have a tremendous advantage, all of you, except for the few of you who are thinking about statewide races, because you actually are in the position to personally talk to and convince, maybe as mayor is not in that position, but most of you are in the position to personally talk to and convince every voter who you need to reach, right? If you do it right. Okay, next slide here. Okay, a job worth doing is worth doing well. So what targeting allows you to do is really do a great job talking to the voters who are going to make the difference in your campaign, as opposed to, you know, kind of a shitty job talking to a lot of other people. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some other elements of strategy and planning. So what is a campaign? I just want to talk a little bit about what I mean by strategy and planning. So what's a strategy on a campaign?
Talk to every frequent voter.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but more theoretically, what does it in the back?
I think it's more of who are we talking to? What are like our methods of communication? How frequent do we go to certain places? Things like that.
You guys are all talking about really wonderful elements of the plan you might build around your strategy. Even bigger picture.
It's the path. It's your
Yeah.
path to victory. How are you going to get
Right?
there?
How are we going to win?
Why are you running?
Right?
What makes
How
you
are we going to win this race? And this is going to be different for every race, right? How do you know if you've won a race? Just so we're clear. You get the most votes, right? Or maybe if you're like one of four, you get the top 4 most votes, right? But so we're going to get the number of votes that we need. And this is our path to doing it, is our strategy. And it is not actually the same for every candidate, although it usually involves talking to people directly. So when we're talking about a strategy or a campaign plan, I want you to be thinking about sort of, this is the roadmap, right? And you're going to do a lot of different things on the way. That's tactics, right? And knocking on doors is a tactic. Sending a piece of mail is a tactic. But you're keeping in your head, this is what needs to happen in order for me to win. Think of that as the roadmap. And that will include, like, voters need to understand this race as a contest between a, like, outsider and politics as usual, right? We'll include some message, things like that. It will include, I sometimes think of them as strategic imperatives, right? In order for me to win, we will need to have built a base that is, you know, bigger than the one that currently exists in our district. Okay. So how are you going to get these people to vote for you? You need a roadmap. When people talk about a campaign plan, and you probably have heard this if you started working on campaigns or talking to them, they're like, you need a campaign plan. You don't just need a plan, you need a plan that's actually going to get you to winning. So I'm going to say a few things about a campaign plan and then go back to a few different elements of strategy. Okay, why do you need a campaign plan? Give me some suggestions.
So you can use your time well.
Okay, great. Time, what else?
Can you volunteers if they don't know what the plan is?
It helps to, absolutely, you can, but it helps to get volunteers if they're like, oh, I get what's going on here. I see how this gets us to winning. Yep. Budgeting, for sure, right? You know where your money, you're going to need to spend your money.
Show people you're asking money from that you're serious.
Yeah, right? People want to see it. They want to know if you're serious. What else?
To me, would be to know if you're making progress and doing the right thing. I mean, if you have a plan and it doesn't feel like you're getting traction or whatever,
Yep.
you can adjust because you have a plan that you remember.
Yep. It's a way of sort of evaluating your progress along the way. Were you going to say something else, Nick?
And then ensuring effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. There's one other really important one, and I forget exactly which the ones are up on the slide, but the one from my head that's really important is that it allows you to get buy-in from your whole team and get everybody sort of pointed in the same direction. Because campaigns are hard and stressful, right? And there are going to be moments where there's like a fight about what we should be doing. And at that moment, you want to be able to be like, okay, what was the plan? You're physically going to get out the document. You're going to look at it together and talk about what you wrote down there. It helps clarify roles and get agreement because no campaign is done by one person. And so you need that over time. Okay, let's see what this says. Creates a roadmap to victory, builds consensus among the team, defines roles, timeline, budget, right? Okay. Establishes credibility, nice job. the Knicks are sitting together. Okay, 5 key questions for a campaign plan. What needs to be done, right? We need to knock on each of these 5,000 doors. We need to raise $20,000. Who will do the work? How much of that is the candidate's responsibility? How much of that is being done by the team? Who on the team? When will it take place? We need to raise that 5,000, we need to raise, what did I say, $20,000? Like, when do you need it? Do you need it all at the beginning of the campaign? Probably not, right? Will it work for you if you get it in the last week? Probably not, right? Like, you're gonna need it a little bit before that. How much will it cost? Everything on a campaign has a price tag. Even if it's just volunteers knocking on doors, you need them to have like water bottles and granola bars and clipboards and pens, and like probably you are gonna need to pay somebody, if you don't have a terrific volunteer to do this, to like call them and remind them to come in, right? Even grassroots campaigns have real costs to them. And then why is it necessary to winning? One of the things that always happens on a campaign is you got a bunch of smart people in a room, and they keep coming up with some great ideas, right? Fun ideas, cool ideas, innovative ideas, and a lot of those are things you actually should not do, even though they are indeed cool, because they are not necessary to winning. And if you have any kind of competitive race, you need to focus all of your energy on the things that really are necessary to winning, right? So you want to be able to ask yourself about every idea that you or somebody else on the team has, like, is this really necessary to winning? Which one of the strategic imperatives that I've laid out for myself does this really advance? And if you're having a hard time answering that question, file that great idea away for another campaign somewhere else down the line where it actually does advance the key strategic goals, right? Hopefully all of you are going to be doing this for a while. You're going to have other opportunities to try out your cool ideas. There's a reason, Mark and I were talking about this the other day, there's like a reason that campaigns are not always super innovative, right? Because you need to focus your efforts on things that you know for sure are going to advance your strategy. Okay. Oh no. Key campaign plan components. And let me just say that these are written down, because it's very hard to refer back to them if they aren't. And they don't need to be in a beautiful binder. Sometimes it's a folder on my computer that has all these documents in it, but message and media, whatever research you've done, whatever documents you've developed from message development, we'll talk about that later. What you're planning to do in terms of paid media and earned media, like what press releases, press events, maybe what mail pieces. Voter contact and field, we're going to talk a bunch about this, both today and tomorrow. Targeting. We need to talk to all likely voters. What is our definition of that on this campaign? Like, what is the literal list of people who we're going to talk to? Campaign is often called a universe, right? Which is a super grand and somewhat confusing way of talking about it. I think it's because once you have set that universe, it is the whole universe to you, right? This is the people you're going to mail to. This is the people you're going to door knock. This is the people you're going to wonder if you're going to a community meeting. Are these people at this community meeting or are they not? And if they're not, you're not going to go, right? So your whole universe is structured around this. Voter registration, if you're starting early enough, you could do some of this, right? It's probably not a great use of your time in the last 6 months of the campaign, but a lot of you are talking about running for office a year from now, so you do have a little time where you could do some of that stuff. Base building, visibility, get out the vote. All these things should be included in your plan. Okay. Other key campaign plan components. Money. How much do you need? Where are you going to raise it from? How are you going to get it? Who has to do what work to get it, right? It's nice to say I'm going to raise $10,000 or I'm going to raise $100,000, but what's the list of people that's going to come from? Who's going to actually have to spend time asking people for money in order to get them to write those checks? I guess these days it's probably online. Organization and infrastructure. How are we going to set this up? Who is going to be responsible for doing what? Who's going to be accountable for which kinds of things? And Abby's going to talk a little bit about this tomorrow. You don't always need to know in in advance who is gonna do absolutely every single thing, but you need to know which roles you need filled at the very beginning and figure out how to slot people into those roles. I will say, campaign plans change over time, especially this thing about who's gonna do what, right? Some people, for sure, some people will disappoint you, right? Some people will not be able to do or not be willing to do the thing that you need them to do. Also, for sure, some people you have never met will show up and do awesome things on your campaign, right? Both of those things are definitely gonna happen. So you don't always know completely in advance who's gonna do what. You're gonna have to adjust over time. A timeline, right? Remember I said about a strategy, there are different circumstances at the end of the campaign than there are at the beginning. You may say it is a strategic imperative in my campaign for people to understand that my opponent has like all these like shady campaign finance problems, right? It might be. Do they need to understand that right now? No, right? We have a long time until election day for each and every single one of you. So some things are going to happen much later in the campaign and will have a very different impact if they happen later in the campaign than if they happen sooner. This is generally true of like negatives about your opponent, right? If they come at the very beginning of the campaign, people are like, who is this whiny dude who keeps complaining about this guy we know and generally feel okay about, right? If they come later in the campaign, they're like, I've met this guy, I've talked to him on my door, I've heard a bunch of great things about him, and now I realize that actually this other incumbent has not been so great, and I hear that from a source that I now trust, right? Feel pretty good about. Very different impact depending on when in the campaign it happens. What kind of events are you going to do? When are you going to schedule them? And I've said this a couple times, but let me make this explicit. Some things that are not a waste of your time to do this winter, like spend a lot of time talking to your Democratic town committees and getting them invested in your campaigns, are going to be a waste of time to do come June. Why?
It's too late.
It's too late. Why do you mean it's too late?
It's getting too late.
Okay. I think probably by June those people will have made up their minds.
They've all been
You're in the
given.
green box, hopefully.
Hopefully you're in the green box at that point, right? And hopefully, hopefully they're all already volunteering for you.
They only meet once a month.
And if they're not already volunteering for you, they probably are never gonna, right? Which is like a fairly real thing in a lot of your Democratic town committees, is they're not actually gonna do anything. Okay. Does that make sense? Great. Campaign plan's gonna have all those things in it. Not all tactics are created equal. Your campaign plan is gonna focus your resources on the things that really work. This is a complicated slide, but the point of this is we're gonna tell you to spend your time, most of your time and most of your resources on face-to-face personal contact with targeted voters, mostly at their doors. And we're not doing that because we're like trying to make you get sunburned and cold and spend a lot of time outside, right? We're doing that because there's powerful evidence, both from our experience of running campaigns and like academic evidence, that that's what works. These are GOTV tactics. Door-to-door canvassing, by far the most powerful. Conversational phone call where you talk to someone personally, still effective, but half as effective as a door-to-door contact. A piece of literature left at someone's door, 10%. Rushed phone calls, even less. Single piece of mail, even less. Robocalls, emails, almost no effect. This is GOTV. It's a little different for persuasion, but the hierarchy is about the same, right? Yes?
What does GOTV?
Oh, great question. I'm sorry I didn't do this before. GOTV is campaign jargon for the turnout of voters who might or might not vote. So it stands for get out the vote.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So lots of campaigns spend most of their energy on this in the last few days. You probably want to be thinking about it from the very beginning. How are we going to turn out our people and make sure that they actually show up? Yeah. And so GOTV tactics are ranked this way. Same for persuasion, right? So we'll spend an enormous amount of time in this training talking about face-to-face voter contact, about canvassing, about door-to-door contact. We do that not because we think it's better small d democracy, or gets you better in touch with your constituents, or helps you learn the community, or is super respectful of voters and their actual like individual needs. All those things are true. It is like a great like sort of, it's become this kind of like ethic of campaigns. I think after the Obama campaign, a bunch of people are like, we spend all our time knocking on doors, that's what we do, right? We don't do, none of those things are the reason we're gonna tell you to do it. We do it because we win more often when we do this, right? We do it because it's one of the things that we can control that actually matters toward winning. Okay. I don't even...
Real quick, but do you win more often because you do all those things? You connect, you know, all the...
So, okay, let's talk, we're gonna talk a little bit more about it. Yeah, okay, so why is door-to-door more effective than another kind of contact? Let's just sort of talk about that for a moment.
You're building a relationship.
It's more personal, right?
Yeah, I think it shows you care. If you're willing to walk around and knock on my door.
They see you and meet you.
Especially if you're the candidate, like when we're ranking tactics, like the candidate knocking on your door is more persuasive than a volunteer knocking on your door, although like second is a committed volunteer. You had your hand up. Angela.
I was thinking too, some people may not be conscious that you're actually running.
Right.
Some people...
Hard to ignore you when you're right there.
And sometimes too, it's, it depends on like who may be showing up at your door, because I think lots of times too, there are people who are looking at the list voting for one particular person, but don't understand that there's a whole slew of other officials. And I think that facial recognition, like nobody will remember, oh yeah, this is this person from this city. But I might remember, oh yeah, Sue came to my door the other day, and you know what, yeah.
Karen?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
I don't know if this is a true thing in campaigns, but it is in organizing, is that you have to understand people's issues in order to move them to action.
Right? So you're going to show up at someone's door, and one of the things you're going to be able to do in that conversation that you definitely can't do in most other kinds of contexts is ask them what they care about. Now, you're going to do that sort of, you're going to tell them what you care about too, right? And you're going to deliver a message as well. But like, if they're undecided, knowing what issues they care about is going to make your ability to follow up with them much better. Yep. What else?
I think as a reader and whoever's going to be the candidate to do door-to-door, just to get to their condition, not to be like so political correct on, you know, on the issue, just to get to know the neighbors, the city a little bit more when they do it door-to-door.
All those things are true. I think it works because of three things, and just remember that sort of 9 box we looked at before. Persuasion was in that middle piece there. So first of all, door-to-door is super targeted, right? You are literally going to get a list of just the voters who you want to talk to. Then you're going to show up at their door. You know you're talking to the right person. And you can deliver exactly your message. And it matters a lot what message you deliver. I always tell this story. I feel bad about the people who it throws under the bus. But I once worked on a campaign where I had a great canvassing operation, ton of people canvassing. I went out. I asked them how they were doing. They had a really enthusiastic volunteer coordinator. He said, okay, I'll pull it up. He had all the data. He's like, yesterday we had 15 people canvassing. And I said, great. How many people out of those, with those conversations said, yes, we'll support your candidate? And he looked up, he said 17%. And I thought, oh shit, this guy is gonna lose. And then I said, okay, Brendan, what are you telling them about our candidate before you ask them if you can have their vote? And he told me, and it sounded fine, right? But this campaign had done some work, the kind of work that you all are going to go through this afternoon, to figure out what the most effective message was. It actually done some polling too. And I said, okay, what is the most effective? It's right up on the website, right? They've done the job of putting it in the media stuff. I said, say that. You know, have your volunteers say that to people. And I'm really worried about this, so call me tonight after everyone comes back from canvassing and let me know how it goes. So I got a call at like 11 o'clock at night, and he's like, I don't believe it. Today, 47% of people said yes, right? So if you're wondering how much of a difference does that message component of this make, the answer is a lot, right? Some people were saying yes anyway. But lots of people really, they need to hear that persuasive message, and I think sometimes people are like, can you possibly deliver enough of a persuasive message in like a couple-minute conversation with a voter? Absolutely. Not for everybody. Some people are going to require longer conversations and are going to take longer to make up their minds. But most people, like, they want to know that you share their values. They want to know that you're on their team. And if they know that, they're going to say yes. It should be called GOOV. Get out our vote, right? Now, right, if Mark has agreed and Brenda have agreed to vote for me, and I've talked to Tony 4 times, and every time he's been like, I don't know, maybe, who am I turning out to vote? Mark and Brenda. What am I doing to Tony? I am ignoring him, right?
That makes you feel bad.
Once we get to the end of the campaign, I'm going to talk to him all through the campaign, see if I can't get him to change his mind. But like we get to the last week and I'm turning out votes, I'm not turning you out. So this is the other reason why I think someone who asked this question, why is door knocking so effective? It combines, this is an element of strategy, it combines 2 really important objectives. 1, it's very effective persuasion. 2, it sets us up to be able to do really good GOTV. Does that make sense?
I just wanted to say that knocking on doors, I felt like it allowed me to refine my message as I went, as a candidate. That if you're engaging really in conversations with people, you're getting the feedback as to how what you thought was a great message is resonating, and you're able to, it informs my thinking about all of the issues, and it subtly alters what I might say.
Yeah, this is a great point. I'm going to respond to this and then you and Jen. So, by definition, none of us know what message swing voters will respond to, right? Like, we are all convinced to vote for us, and so are all of the people who we might gather in our living room to help us figure out what our message is. So, by definition, nobody in that conversation about what should the message be is actually in the mind of an undecided voter, right? So, you need to test a message. Like, you can't just develop it in your living room. You're gonna create you're gonna do some good strategic work that Ari's gonna talk about later to come up with probably a couple of possibilities, and then you have to test it. You can test it a couple of different ways. A big campaign, a mayoral campaign, a statewide campaign. You should probably do a poll. Like, that's a scientific way of asking undecided voters, of these 3 or 4 true and wonderful things about this candidate, which ones actually resonate with you? Which ones actually move you? If you're running for city council, you probably don't have the budget to do that, but you are out there talking to undecided voters on a regular basis, so you can try some different things and see what actually works, right? You could do exactly the experiment that we did by accident on this campaign, right? If you're like, oh boy, like I'm not getting a ton of yeses, try something else. Like, see if it works better. You can do it systematically at the beginning of the campaign and see what is actually getting people to be like, oh yeah, actually that sounds great to me. That's what I want in my city councilor. Because you won't be able to figure that out just sitting around your living room with your friends. That's a great point. Another useful thing, and throughout the campaign there will be things like that. The door knocking generates an enormous amount of data, and it can help you refine all kinds of things. Like, you might be like, this is a neighborhood where we never get people, we're not getting very many people home. Try knocking it at a different time of day, right? Like, this is a neighborhood where we are not getting a lot of yeses. Are we sending volunteers who aren't the most persuasive in that particular community? Is it just like our opponent's home turf and we're just not going to get a lot of yeses, in which case maybe we shouldn't spend as much time there? Like, there are a lot of different things that data can tell you that can help you refine as you go. Jen?
What are laws and city ordinances around door knocking? I've noticed with other things, just trying to get the word out about other things, there's some cities say that you're not allowed to, or maybe
yeah, it's a free speech issue. It's political speech. They are definitely not allowed to tell you can't do it. Now, some people have those no soliciting signs up on their doors. I'm not telling you you're not going to get yelled at if you knock on a door that has one of those. You might. You might get kicked out of a building. You've certainly had canvassers be stopped by the police, especially black male canvassers, right? So I'm not saying people, but like the law is you're allowed to knock on people's doors and talk to them about politics. Yeah.
I do know that with mailers or with just
you're not supposed to put them in mailboxes.
Yes.
So you
You can't
have to
put them in mailboxes.
So that is illegal, but you have, so if someone's not home, you want to drop off a piece of paper,
Yeah,
put
this-
it in their door,
Yeah, did you guys all hear that? That the people's mailboxes are technically property of the federal government, so you're not allowed to put things that aren't mail in them, but you can like leave somebody something on their door or whatever, somewhere else.
And mail slot is a mailbox.
Yes.